A die PL, dice, sometimes also used as SG, is a small, throwable object with marked sides that can rest in multiple positions. Dice are used for generating random values, commonly as part of tabletop games, including dice games, board games, role-playing games, and games of chance. A traditional die is a cube with each of its 6 faces marked with a different number of dots, pips, from 1 to 6. When thrown or rolled, the die comes to rest showing a random integer from 1 to 6 on its upper surface, with each value being equally likely. Dice may also have other polyhedral or irregular shapes, may have faces marked with numerals or symbols instead of pips, and may have their numbers carved out from the material of the dice instead of marked on it. Loaded dice are specifically designed or modified to favor some results over others, for cheating or entertainment purposes. History knucklebones die, made of soapstone dice, have been used since before recorded history, and their origin is uncertain. It is hypothesized that dice developed from the practice of fortune-telling with the tailless of hoofed animals, colloquially known as knucklebones. The ancient Egyptian game of senet, played before 3000 BCE and up to the 2nd century CE, was played with flat two-sided throw sticks, which indicated the number of squares a player could move, and thus functioned as a form of dice. Perhaps the oldest known dice were excavated as part of a backgammon-like game set at the Burnt City, an archaeological site in southeastern Iran, estimated to be from between 2800 and 2500 BCE. Bone dice from Skara Brae, Scotland, have been dated to 3100 to 2400 BCE. Excavations from graves at Mohenjo-Daro, an Indus Valley civilization settlement, unearthed terracotta dice dating to 2500 to 1900 BCE, including at least one die whose opposite sides all add up to 7, as in modern dice. Games involving dice are mentioned in the ancient Indian Rigveda, Atharvaveda, Mahabharata, and the Buddhist games list. Knucklebones was a game of skill played in ancient Greece. A derivative form had the 4 sides of bones receive different values like modern dice. 20-sided serpentinite die from Ptolemaic Egypt. Although gambling was illegal, many Romans were passionate gamblers who enjoyed dicing, which was known as a lime ludier, to play at dice. There were 2 sizes of Roman dice. Tali were large dice inscribed with 1, 3, 4, and 6 pips on 4 sides. Tesserae were smaller dice with sides numbered from 1 to 6. 20-sided dice date back to the 2nd century CE, and from Ptolemaic Egypt as early as the 2nd century BCE. Dominoes and playing cards originated in China as developments from dice. The transition from dice to playing cards occurred in China around the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, and coincides with the technological transition from rolls of manuscripts to block-printed books. In Japan, dice were used to play a popular game called sugoroku. There are 2 types of sugoroku. Bansugoroku is similar to backgammon and dates to the Heian period, 794 to 1185 CE, while isugoroku is a racing game. Roman wall painting showing 2 dice players. Pompeii, 1st century composite image of all sides of a 12 mm, 1/2 in Roman die. Found in Leicestershire, England. A collection of historical dice from various regions of Asia. Getty Images explore Chinese dice from late Yuan dynasty to early Qing dynasty in Jiangyan Museum, China. Etymology and terms. The word die comes from Old French day, from Latin datum, something which is given or played. While the terms ace, deuce, tray, cater, cinque, and sice are generally obsolete, with the names of the numbers preferred, they are still used by some professional gamblers to designate different sides of the dice. Ace is from the Latin as meaning a unit. The others are 2 to 6 in Old French. When rolling 2 dice, certain combinations have slang names. The term snake eyes is a roll of 1 pip on each die. The online etymology dictionary traces use of the term as far back as 1919. The U.S. term boxcars, also known as midnight, is a roll of 6 pips on each die. The pair of 6 pips resembles a pair of boxcars on a freight train. Many rolls have names in the game of craps. Use dice are thrown onto a surface either from the hand or from a container designed for this, such as a cup, tray, or tower. The face or corner in cases such as tetrahedral dice, or edge, for odd-numbered long dice of the die that is uppermost when it comes to rest, provides the value of the throw. The result of a die roll is determined by the way it is thrown. according to the laws of classical mechanics, although luck is often credited for the results of a roll. A die roll is made random by uncertainty in minor factors such as tiny movements in the thrower's hand. They are thus a crude form of hardware random number generator. Construction chirality of dice. Faces may be placed counterclockwise, top, or clockwise. Arrangement common dice are small cubes, most often 1.6 centimeters, 0.63 in across, whose faces are numbered from 1 to 6, usually by patterns of round dots called pips. While the use of Arabic numerals is occasionally seen, such dice are less common. Opposite sides of a modern die traditionally add up to 7, requiring the 1, 2, and 3 faces to share a vertex. The faces of a die may be placed clockwise or counterclockwise about this vertex. If the 1, 2, and 3 faces run counterclockwise, the die is called right-handed. If those faces run clockwise, the die is called left-handed. Western dice are normally right-handed, and Chinese dice are normally left-handed. Typical facets showing the more compact pip arrangement of an Asian-style die. Top versus a Western-style die, bottom. The pips on standard 6-sided dice are arranged in specific patterns as shown. Asian-style dice bear similar patterns to Western ones, but the pips are closer to the center of the face. In addition, the pips are differently sized on Asian-style dice, and the pips are colored red on the 1 and 4 sides. The red 4s may be of Indian origin. Manufacturing typical Western non-precision dice use opaque plastic and have recessed pips. In general, dice are classified as either precision or non-precision. Precision dice, also known as perfect or gambling house dice, are used in casinos, while non-precision dice, also known as drugstore or candy store dice, are sold with social and board games. These types are easily distinguished with visual and tactile differences. Precision dice generally are larger, translucent, and have flush markings, sharp corners and edges, while non-precision dice generally are smaller, opaque, and have recessed markings, rounded corners and edges. Non-precision dice are manufactured via the plastic injection molding process, often made of polymethyl methacrylate, PMMA. The pips or numbers on the die are a part of the mold. Different pigments can be added to the dice to make them opaque or transparent, or multiple pigments may be added to make the dice speckled or marbled. The coloring for numbering is achieved by submerging the die entirely in paint, which is allowed to dry. The die is then polished via a tumble finishing process similar to rock polishing. The abrasive agent scrapes off all of the paint except for the indents of the numbering. A finer abrasive is then used to polish the die. This process also produces the smoother, rounded edges on the dice. These canceled precision dice from Tropicana Atlantic City are made from lucent red cellulose acetate and flush pips. Precision dice are generally made from bars of extruded cellulose acetate, sawed to the proper length to ensure that each face is as square as practical, generally with edges 3/4 plus or minus 1/5000 in 19.05 plus or minus 0.0051 millimeters in length. With pips drilled 17 plus or minus 4 mils, 0.43 plus or minus 0.1 millimeters, deep and filled with opaque paint or epoxy which matches the density of cellulose, ensuring the dice remain balanced. The dice are buffed and polished to a gloss or sand finish after the pips are set, and the edges usually are left sharp, also called square or razor edge, although beveled or rounded edges, if performed evenly and consistently for each edge, are acceptable. Precision casino dice are transparent or translucent. This makes it difficult to incorporate internal weights which could bias the roll. To discourage cheating by dice substitution, each die carries a serial number and the casino's logo or name. Local regulations and the intended game may affect the allowable dimensions and tolerances. For example, New Jersey specifies the maximum size of a die is 0.775 in 19.7 millimeters on a side, except for the dice used in Pai Gow, which range from 0.637 to 0.643 in 16.2 to 16.3 millimeters on a side. Precision backgammon dice also share the flush pip construction, but tend to be smaller with heavily rounded corners. Precision backgammon dice are made the same way and also feature pips flush with the surface of each face. They tend to be slightly smaller and have rounded corners and edges. To allow better movement inside the dice cup, and stop forceful rolls from damaging the playing surface. Unicode characters. The faces can be shown in text, using the range U+2680 to U+2685, or using decimal 2, and the emoji using U+1F3B2, or game die from the miscellaneous symbols and pictographs block. Loaded dice. A loaded, weighted, cheat, or crooked die is one that has been tampered with so that it will land with a specific side facing upwards more often or less often than a fair die would. There are several methods for making loaded dice, including rounded faces, off-square faces, and weights. Casinos and gambling halls frequently use transparent cellulose acetate dice, as tampering is easier to detect than with opaque dice. Variance polyhedral dice. A typical set of polyhedral dice in various colors. They consist of the 5 platonic solids, along with a 10-sided die that is also used for generating percentages. Various shapes such as 2-sided or 4-sided dice are documented in archaeological findings, for example, from ancient Egypt and the Middle East. While the cubical 6-sided die became the most common type in many parts of the world, other shapes were always known, like 20-sided dice in Ptolemaic and Roman times. The modern tradition of using sets of polyhedral dice started around the end of the 1960s when non-cubical dice became popular among players of wargames, and since have been employed extensively in role-playing games and trading card games. Dice using both the numerals 6 and 9, which are reciprocally symmetric through rotation, typically distinguish them with a dot or underline. Some 20-sided dice have a different arrangement used for the purpose of keeping track of an integer that counts down, such as health points. These spin-down dice are arranged such that adjacent integers appear on adjacent faces, allowing the user to easily find the next lower number. They are commonly used with collectible card games. Common variations dice are often sold in sets, matching in color, of 6 different shapes. 5 of the dice are shaped like the platonic solids. The 5 platonic solids have 4, 6, 8, 12, and 20 faces. The only other common non-cubical die is the 10-sided die, a pentagonal trapezohedron die. Unlike other common dice, a 4-sided tetrahedral die does not have a side that faces upward when it is at rest on a surface, so it must be read in a different way. On some 4-sided dice, each face features multiple numbers, with the same number printed near each vertex on all sides. In this case, the number around the vertex pointing up is used. Alternatively, the numbers on a tetrahedral die can be placed at the middle of the edges, in which case the numbers around the base are used. Normally, the faces on a die will be placed so opposite faces will add up to one more than the number of faces. Some dice, such as those with 10 sides, are usually numbered sequentially beginning with 0, in which case the opposite faces will add to one less than the number of faces. Faces sides shape notes 4 tetrahedron. Each face has 3 numbers. This die does not roll well, and thus is usually thrown into the air instead. 6 cube, the most common variation of die. The sum of the numbers on opposite faces is 7.8 octahedron. Each face is triangular. Usually, the sum of the opposite faces is 9.1 pentagonal trapezohedron. Each face is a kite. The 10-sided die is usually numbered 0 to 9, though the 0 can also be read as a 10.12 dodecahedron. Each face is a regular pentagon. The sum of the numbers on opposite faces is usually 13.2 icosahedron. Faces are equilateral triangles. The sum of the numbers on opposite faces is 21 if numbered 1 to 20. Rarer variations dice collection. D2, D22, D24, D26, D28, D30, D36, D48, D50, D60, and D100 uniform fair dice are dice where all faces have an equal probability of outcome due to the symmetry of the die as it is face transitive. In addition to the platonic solids, these theoretically include Catalan solids, trapezohedra, bipyramids, and dysphenoids. 2 other types of polyhedra are technically not face transitive, but are still fair dice due to symmetry. Antiprisms, barrel dice, and prisms, long dice and T-dotums. Faces/sides shape notes 1 Möbius strip, or sphere. Most commonly, a joke die 2 flat cylinder or flat prism. A coin, flip 3 rounded off triangular prism. A long die, intended to be rolled lengthwise. 4 capped 4-sided long die. A long die, intended to be rolled lengthwise 5 triangular prism thin enough to land either on its edge or face. 6 capped 6-sided long die used to simulate cricket. Scoring 7 pentagonal prism 7-sided dice are used in a 7-player variant of backgammon. 100 zacahedron A sphere containing another sphere with 100 facets flattened into it. See source text for full list of rarer variations. Non-numeric dice. A set of fudge dice. The faces of most dice are labeled using sequences of whole numbers. However, there are some applications that require results other than numbers. Examples include letters for boggle, directions for warhammer, fudge dice, playing card symbols for poker dice, and instructions for sexual acts using sex dice. Alternatively numbered dice may have numbers that do not form a counting sequence starting at 1. One variation is the average die, numbered 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, and 5. Other numbered variations include Sicherman dice and intransitive dice. Spherical dice. A spherical die. A die can be constructed in the shape of a sphere, with the addition of an internal cavity in the shape of the dual polyhedron of the desired die shape and an internal weight. The weight will settle in one of the points of the internal cavity, causing it to settle with one of the numbers uppermost. Applications. Playing dice by Master Jean de Malian. C. 1520. One typical contemporary dice game is craps. Dice are frequently used to introduce randomness into board games, where they are often used to decide the distance through which a piece will move along the board, as in backgammon and Monopoly. Many board games use dice to randomize how far pieces move or to settle conflicts. Some games, such as Axis and Allies, make lower values more potent. In modern games like Castles of Burgundy, players spend their dice to take actions based on the die's value. In Quarriors, different sides of the dice can offer completely different abilities. Dice can be used for divination, and using dice for such a purpose is called claromancy. Astrological dice are a specialized set of 3 12-sided dice for divination. Dice can be used to generate random numbers for use in passwords and cryptography applications. Diceware is a method recommended for generating secure but memorable passphrases. Thrown or simulated dice are sometimes used to generate specific probability distributions, which are fundamental to probability theory. Notation. Main article. Dice notation. In many gaming contexts, especially tabletop role-playing games, shorthand notations are used to differentiate between different types of dice. The most commonly used notation is written as NDS, where N is the number of dice and S is the number of sides. For example, 2d6 means 2 6-sided dice. The notation also allows for adding or subtracting a constant amount C to the roll, NDS plus C or NDS minus C. For example, 3d6 plus 4 means roll 3 6-sided dice, sum them, and add 4 role-playing dice sets and percentile dice. Typical role-playing dice, showing a variety of colors and styles. Polyhedral dice are commonly used in role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. A role-playing dice set typically comprises 7 dice, one each of D4, D6, D8, D12, and D20, and 2 D10s, 10 to 9, 10 to 90, for use as percentile dice, D100. The zacahedron was invented as an alternative to percentile dice.